Again, in relation to the questions, I'm a great believer in, if you have questions as we go, put them in the chat, put them into the chat function, and we will deal with them as we go. Developing an annual activity report. This presentation is mainly aimed at the small charities, and that is charities with an income that would be roughly 50k or less. Host has asked you to start your video.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd
be
easier if we could see you, Michael.
All right. Okay. Can you see me now?
Yeah. Oh, did. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Your annual report is really about telling your story and giving feedback for the period under review. We'll also look at why an annual report. We'll go through the sections 1 to 3, and hopefully we'll take maybe a bit of a breather at that stage, depending on how you're feeling. And then we'll work through the remaining sections, and we'll have a feedback and hopefully some general discussion, general questions at the end, and then we'll do a wrap up. So you've got about an hour and maybe 15 minutes or an hour and a half, whatever time it takes. Again, this workshop is being delivered free of charge, thanks to the support from the Community Foundation Ireland and Pubble. The session outcomes. What are we trying to achieve here? Well, first of all, understand the purpose of an annual report. Again, to describe the legal compliance requirements for an annual report, and review what should be in an annual report. What really should it contain? Decide on the style of presentation and content. The style will possibly be molded and shaped by your good selves. And then plan how to produce an effective annual report for your organization. So hopefully you'll get some good ideas and some hints by the time this presentation is completed. If at the end of the presentation you have some further questions, you can send them to the Donegal Volunteer Centre, or you can send them direct to me at michael@carmichaelireland.ie, and we will do our utmost to get answers for you. So tell your story. This presentation is clearly designed for a live audience, but we would normally have people explain what their organization does, how it operates, etc., and all the rest of it. And that part of the live presentations was found by lots and lots of people who participated in these presentations, found it most beneficial to hear other people tell their story, talk openly about the challenges which they faced, and talk about how they overcame those challenges. Of course, we are talking about the 2019 annual report in relation to this presentation. So why an annual report? An annual report represents a real opportunity for small organizations in a non-for-profit sector to tell your story and showcase their transparency by outlining the performance, the governance, the culture, and the financials of your organization. So it's mainly an opportunity to showcase your organization and to tell the story of your organization, which will obviously cover the period since its foundation, and perhaps some few sentences on the journey to date, what you did for the past 12 months, and again, where you're going into the future, and your plans and ideas for the time ahead. How the report actually looks will be unique to you. It's your story. It isn't anybody else's story. It's a story for your organization. So it will be unique to you. And ideally, it would contain photos of events perhaps during the year, perhaps of individuals who have a story to tell, and testimonials from your trustees, your service users, and volunteers. Okay. There are 6 sections to it. The core organization information, then there's a brief description of your organization, how you were governed, which is very important, we'll be coming to that, what you set out to achieve versus what you actually achieved, and then try and explain the variances as best you can. Income and expenditure, very important, and then plans for the coming year and future years. Where are you going and how are you going to get there, and what are your proposals for that? So the first section of your annual report would be your front page or your cover page. the name of your organization, and it's the legal name of your organization, and that legal name will be contained in your memorandum and articles, or nowadays referred to as a constitution. It's the same document. So you need to have a copy of the up-to-date memorandum and articles as it is lodged in the company's registration office. Again, the period under review will be the 1st of January to the 31st of December. Sorry, in relation to the legal name there, sometimes organizations get cut out on that because they may have moved location. So the location address will have changed. So it needs to be updated on the company's registration office as well, where that occurs. Again, the company number, that's the CRO number. If you have a CHY number under the revenue system, include that number as well, together with your charity registration number, your CRA number. And if you have a logo, most organizations have a logo, certainly emblazon that on the front page or the cover page of your, as you so choose. So the organization's purpose and activities. This is central to the organization's reason for existence. And of course, these reasons for your existence, your main objectives are set out in your memorandum and articles, usually on the first page or the first page and a half. And that's what you're working against. It is also an opportunity for you and for your organization at this stage, maybe to look at, is there a need to update the reasons for your existence? When last did the organization carry out such a review? The annual report is a key communication device to stakeholders, and the stakeholders are your beneficiaries, the volunteers, the staff, the funders, and the supporters, and other interested parties, and that includes the general public, the people who may be making private contributions to your fundraising, for example. They have read your annual report and they have found it quite attractive, and they are impressed by the work that you do. And should clearly set out the organization's purpose. Now that will be set out in your constitution or your memorandum and articles, and that's the reason why you exist. Then the key objectives, what you hope to achieve during the past 12 months, your main activities, what you do, the main activities that you undertake in relation to your purpose. Every purpose has a sequence of actions to be performed in order for you to achieve your objective. So again, those have to be in line with your organization's constitution or your memorandum and articles. The next part of it is really a brief statement by the chairperson and treasurer. I know when I say brief, it should be no more than maybe 10 to 15 minutes. There'll be an overview of the key successes or achievements or challenges that the organization faced during the year. Remember, the annual report has to be approved by the board. It may be produced by the manager or the CEO or other staff members. I'm sure the finance people will also contribute to it. But speaking from experience, where I was often found to be producing an annual report myself, it has to go to the board for approval. You may have written it, but it has to go to the board for approval, because it is the board's annual activity report. So the chairperson would address the audience and give the key successes, the achievements, and the challenges. He would hopefully thank the funders, the supporters, the volunteers, the staff, and identify the challenges experienced during the year. And very often, the manager or the CEO or the senior member of staff actually might write the chairperson's intro or delivery. Refer to upcoming challenges. What are the challenges for the future? The risks that may be encountered in the year ahead, and may also outline plans for the year ahead. May give a brief outline of what the following year is like. Again, this is in relation to the 2019 annual report, which organizations I'm sure will have completed at this stage, hopefully this presentation might help you to review it and perhaps improve on it before it is actually published. Again, the treasurer statements by the Treasurer, is an insight into the income and expenditure. He or she may not go into detail on it, because that detail will be contained in section 5, which we'll be coming to later. Again, the types of fundraising, if fundraising has been undertaken, how the income received was used. In other words, what are the key expenditure headings or the key expenditure items. Again, thank the sponsors, the donors, the service providers, and acknowledge any goods that have been received at a reduced cost, or if any work has been carried out by a pro bono basis. And a lot of people nowadays seem to undertake a lot of pro bono work for various charities and organisations, because they feel they have to make a contribution to their community. Again, the finances will be outlined in section 5, and we can have a discussion on that. Any questions before I move on? Any questions coming in? No. Okay.
Sorry, Michael, we have one. It's not
One,
necessarily.
Feel free to interrupt me, because it might, it can get laborious a little bit where I'm doing all the talking and that kind of thing. If you can make it more of a conversation, it might be more interesting for people.
No problem.
And it might encourage others to write questions as well.
Entirely. It's a question about, I suppose, the difficulties and the complexities around organising a virtual AGM. I suppose, it's any advice or guidance on that. I know it's beyond the scope of the annual report, but it's definitely something that a lot of groups are facing over the coming period.
Sorry, John. Did you say EGM? Yeah.
Holding a virtual AGM, because
yes,
it's an online version.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now I've seen a number of articles written by Arthur Cox solicitors, and one or two other major international firms on the whole question of virtual AGMs. And one of the articles was discouraging it for the time being until the law had been changed. But for small local organisations, if the board members agree, to a Zoom AGM, I don't have any great, as personally, I don't have any great difficulty with that. Okay, if your budget may be $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million, well, then you're into big expenditure, and you have a number of people employed and all that. So you are really a very sophisticated organisation. So the question of a virtual AGM then becomes a big issue. Particularly if you have a membership base, if you're inviting people to your AGM, I'm a member of the Kildare Local Employment Service Network at the moment. It's a CLG, and we had a virtual AGM because all the directors agreed that we could have a virtual AGM through Zoom, and it went down very well, actually. But if you have a membership base, there are challenges because you have to invite your members to the AGM. They have a role and function in relation to the approval of the annual report, etc., and all that. So I suppose seek legal advice. I have an article written by Arthur Cox.
Yeah, I've shared it on the chat.
All right, okay. So that's my response to that, John. I don't know whether that is beneficial or not, but
no, I agree. I think it's small local groups. It's fine, but as the organisation gets more complex, I think it's going to be more challenging. And I suppose the more complex organisation will have its own legal counsel that will be able to advise, just to make sure that every box is being ticked and everything is progressing. Particularly with some of the groups that are here, I know they have responsibilities back to financial regulators and things like that. So definitely be getting independent advice from the solicitor firm and the accountants that represent the group. Make sure that everything's covered.
Yeah, okay. We move on into section 3 in organisation and governance. Here you provide details of your organisation's legal structure. For example, is it an unincorporated association, a company limited by guarantee, or a charity? An unincorporated association obviously is a small local committee that is not legally incorporated. But having said that, the charity regulator has produced a very good constitution for unincorporated associations, and I know a number of groups that I've dealt with have substituted their existing constitution for the guidance document that the charity regulator has put on their website. A company limited by guarantee. Again, the charity regulator has a very good document, constitution on its website, and again, it's worth having having a look at that. The trustees and the board of directors and the committees. The word trustees, of course, came into the nomenclature a big time with the introduction of the Charity Act in 2009. List the name then of each of the trustees, the board members, and also specify the office holders. For example, the chairperson, the treasurer, and the secretary. Describe how people are elected or nominated to the board and the term of office of board members and officers as set out in your constitution. It might say, 3 years and 3 years and not more than 9. My understanding is that the regulator will possibly say, if that office hasn't already done so, not more than 9 years. Again, it's about refreshing the board and keeping, I suppose it's also seen as kind of a safe mechanism, to ensure that no cozy cartels develop at board level. Then the role of the board, the number of meetings held, the record of attendance of each board member. There should be a matrix included, which will give the name of each board member, maybe the date on which they joined, the month and the year in which they joined the board, the number of meetings held in that particular year, and the number of meetings attended to by each individual director. And that will give a clear indication as to the commitment by each director. For example, if there are 8 or 9 or 10 meetings held during the year, has Michael Quick only attended 2 or 3, and did he only attend 2 or 3 last year? So it is also a time for for the board to look at its own performance, and maybe the chairperson might need to talk to 1 or 2 directors to ensure that they increase their attendances, because after all, you have a duty of care. Once you sign the B10 form and become a director, you have a duty of care. You have a duty of care to the organisation, and of course you have a duty of care to the staff. So you also have a duty of care to make sure that you attend as many meetings as possible. Again, it depends on how you're in relation to the elected or nominated to the board. Again, it depends on the process for election. Organizations that have a membership base, they clearly will draw their directors from that membership base. But for organizations who don't, for example, like the Kildare Local Employment Service Network, it's by public request, really, to the website called activelink.ie and their own website, where they request persons with particular skills from time to time in relation to filling vacancies on the board. So again, it's as set out in your constitution, and you've got to follow that. Details of the role of any subcommittees. For example, if you have any subcommittee of finance or fundraising or an audit subcommittee or whatever, the role of that, the role of the subcommittee and its terms of reference. Again, list the names of the members of the subcommittee. When was the subcommittee set up and who the members are, the number of meetings held, and then the record of attendance by each subcommittee member. Again, that is another indicator of the commitment of people to the aims and objectives of the organisation. Provide details of how you manage risk and conflicts of interest. Risk and the management of risk, I think it should be reviewed perhaps about twice a year at least. And of course, conflicts of interest, the emerging protocol there would appear to be that at the start of every meeting now, it's a good idea that the first item is conflicts of interest be declared. make sure that the meeting runs smoothly otherwise. Or the governance standards. If the organisation has adopted or is planning and compliance with the charity's governance code, you may be on the journey in complying with that code, and 2021 will be a challenging year for most organisations, because that's the first year where you're supposed to declare your compliance with the governance code. Again, how that date is going to be influenced by the COVID-19 situation will be a matter clearly for the regulator. Again, there are other best practice codes and quality standards, such as the Statement of Guiding Principles for fundraising. And if you had fundraising during the year, did you comply with the guiding principles? This should be stated in the in your annual activity report. Again, if for those who are funded by public, for example, you may have other standards, and you need to be able to make the statement that you what they are, and that you are in compliance with them. Staffing, again, staffing, I suppose, is in kind of two categories. You know, you have volunteers and you have paid employees. Now, volunteers are staff members as well, so they have to be treated the same as staff members. So your number of volunteers should be stated. What do they do for the organisation? What support and guidance, training, and volunteering, and what supervision is provided to them? How do volunteers get involved and join your organisation? And do you need more people to get involved? For example, if I was in Donegal Town or Ardara or Cardenduna, and I walked into your, I saw your sign on the street, and I walked into your reception area, what is it telling me about volunteers? I might see a sign, for example, that you were seeking volunteers. Does it state what jobs they would be doing? Does it state the number of hours you need them for, the times of day, whether it's week or at the week or at the weekends? How attractive is your advertisement? Does it say something about the training provided and the supervision that the volunteer will be subjected to? You know. What is the message that's given out about volunteers? Because volunteers are special people. People volunteer because they are committed to the aims and objectives of your organisation, and they see the value and the impact that your organisation is making in the community, and they want to be part of that. Whereas employees, and being an employee myself at one stage, I suppose you could say we went to work because we got paid to go to work. Again, the names and the job titles of the senior management, for example, the manager or the CEO, or if you have a chief operating officer or a chief financial officer, they should be stated in the annual report. Okay, any questions so far? Any further questions there that we might?
Yeah, just to come in there, I suppose, with comments around that and the supports. If groups are concerned about getting that information out there to volunteers, and having the advertisements phrased in a certain way, and maybe looking at advertisements that haven't worked in the past, they can come and chat to ourselves in the volunteer centre about that, and we're always keen. I know for a few of the groups that are with us this evening, or quite a few of them, we've helped them recruit volunteers in the past, so hopefully they would be happy enough to say that we're able to do it. Yeah, it is, I suppose. Beyond that, I suppose, yeah, there's sort of questions coming up just about, you know, in this COVID period, how widely do groups share the reports that they've developed? So, you know, do they print them and put them in every coffee shop? Do they put them on the website, or is it just, you know, people that attend the AGM? Where does this report go?
Well, again, the once it's adopted at your AGM, the first place that the report should go is up on your website, where there is a website by the organisation, and again in your reception area. And again, if you get an article into the local newspapers, both very local and maybe at county level. If there are outlets in the community, like a volunteer centre is a very valuable centre to have in a particular town, and why not lodge a number of reports there in the volunteer centre. If there are other which are county libraries, perhaps they would take some copies from you. Depending on the area, I suppose, of your, we call it the area of your jurisdiction, the area that you're servicing, or the area that your service users are drawn from, But once you make that reasonable effort and put it on all the, again, on your website and in your reception area, always try and get an article into the local newspaper when you're holding your AGM. I think will hopefully, will facilitate a demand, to get a copy. Again, you can email it to people. If you have a membership base, you can email it out to all the members.
Okay.
Does that?
That's fantastic, Michael. Yeah, those are great ideas, particularly sending it out to the members, because we all have that register of people who have come in and participated and worked as part of our structures over the year. So, oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. No further questions at this stage? No. Okay. Section 4 then. The main objectives pursued during the reporting period. What you had planned to achieve for the year in order to achieve your objectives, and what was actually achieved over the year. In other words, where are the variances? Was there a variance between what you had planned to achieve, and did you actually achieve those objectives? And why didn't you achieve all your objectives? Was it because, for example, a senior member of staff may have decided to leave, or a key member of staff may have decided to leave? Or is it that perhaps the money that you thought you were going to get in January or February didn't arrive until June or July? Be open and be factual about why you didn't achieve certain objectives fully during the period under review. Use the facts and figures to demonstrate your activities and achievements. Once you use facts, nobody can criticize you. Funders won't criticize you. If the funder didn't give you the money until June or July and you had planned to start in March, well, the facts are that you got the money in July, even though you had an expectation that you might get it in March. Describe what went well. If something went well for you, absolutely, sing its praises and sing the praises of the team that ensured that it went well. But also, something that didn't go so well. If there is a failure, for example, I'm a great believer in the learning that comes out of failure will always lead to new initiatives and new ideas and new creativity about how to do things better. And again, if that is the case, why not state it? Outline the type and number of products or services or facilities that result from your activities. What are the outcomes and outputs? Based factually from your activities, and overall, I suppose, what is the impact of your organisation on the local community or on the society if you're operating at county level? What you had planned to do would enable setting out the reasons why. That's very important, and the future plans, if any, to complete the project or initiative. Okay, if something didn't go well for you because a senior member of staff left or whatever, or the money didn't come down on time, well, state exactly where you are in that process and how you're going to complete it in the following year, and the steps you're going to take. It might be an opportunity as well to look at the area that your organisation services and what that area would be like if your organization did not exist. It's what I call writing the obituary of your organization. If 2 or 3 members of the of the board and the staff, and maybe members of the people in the community that that your organization is servicing, if you sit down and try and just think of what kind of community would it be if your organization did not exist, you might be pleasantly surprised as to some of the answers that you might find. And I think there is no harm in doing that, because again, it's about measuring the impact and being able to state clearly the added value that your organization is giving to various services or various services that it might be supporting, that maybe you're not aware that it's adding value to other services. The key achievements and the outputs for the reporting period. Again, we're very good at talking about our key achievements, and absolutely. Then the beneficiaries. What feedback do you receive from the beneficiaries, the funders, the supporters, and the wider community? What surveys or other ways did you undertake to obtain feedback? Like, when last did you as an organization undertake a survey and ask your beneficiaries, the people who benefit on a daily and weekly basis from your organization's activities, or indeed the wider community, what they think of your organization, what ideas that they might have regarding improving your organization? Can some of those ideas enrich what you are doing? And I'm sure that you get lots of solid comment back from the wider community. Perhaps some of the comments you won't like, but that is community. Not everybody's going to agree with you, but the people who give some good solid ideas, then incorporate those so that your activity is benefiting from the ideas, and incorporate those into the processes that you use to implement your aims and objectives. Did you obtain formal evaluation feedback from participants at events? If you're on a particular event, did you carry out an evaluation? Did you have an evaluation form? Did you circulate it? And did you ask the participants to, did you give them 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, just to complete it? And maybe 3 or 4 key points on an A4 sheet. And what are they saying? What are they saying to you? For example, at the end of this presentation, I would be asking you to complete an evaluation form in relation to the content of the presentation, etc., in relation to this presentation, and indeed in relation to the presenter. And we'll be looking at that feedback, and the Carmichael and myself will be looking at how we can improve where necessary. Consider including some photos and customer testimonials to provide some flavour to your to the annual report. Sure, obviously photographs they tell a story, and if you had an event, a major event or events, make sure you take plenty of photographs so that you can choose then from a number of photographs as to which ones you're going to include in your annual report. And if a particular beneficiary benefited from your services, and they're prepared to give you a testimonial, absolutely. Maybe 2 or 3 of those again will add value to your report. What challenges or difficulties did you face, and how did you address them? What were the challenges or the difficulties that you didn't foresee at the beginning of the year that occurred for you, as indeed they do? And how did you address them? What were the mechanisms you put into place? What were the protocols? What were the actions you took? Were they successful? What is the learning? And are you incorporating that learning into your work? Is your charity making a permanent difference, not just having a once-off effect? Again, as I've already said, what would your community be like? depending on where your charity is based or your organization is based. What would your community be like if your organization did not exist, or if no similar organization existed in your locality? You know, if you sit down to write the obituary of your organization, I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised as to what you're going to find. And if you incorporate, if you include maybe one or two members of your board, maybe one or two members of staff, and the wider members of the wider community, even some of your greatest critics might be, it might be an opportunity as well. And write a very good obituary, and then you can turn it into a positive, because it's the impacts you're making in the community. That's what you're trying to measure all the time, the impact and the value for the public monies that you're in receipt of. And I think in the time ahead, I think we're all going to be under a little bit more pressure in relation to proving that, you know, there is a greater value for money, particularly for public money, than there has been up to the current time. Income and expenditure. Income received. Sorry, before I go on to income and expenditure, any further questions at this time?
Just one or two, Michael. Maybe now will be a good time to just interject. Comment in. How can learning from failure and being honest with your stakeholders improve a group's offerings or offering?
Let's have that again.
Yeah, just how can learning from failure and being honest with your stakeholders improve a group's offering?
Yeah, you see, there's always learning from from failure, because failure has been an experience. What actually went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Was it that the skill base wasn't there? Did somebody leave in the middle of it all? Did a key member of staff leave in the middle of it all? There is a learning from failure, as well as there is a learning from success. Because if there isn't a learning from failure, well then, why did you do it in the first place? If there was no need for doing what it was you failed to achieve, well, why did you set out on the journey in the first place? You set out on the journey with certain objectives and certain initiatives and certain actions that you were going to take. But you found maybe midway that, we're just going to have to change here because this is not turning out the way we thought it would. So, the collective as a team, there's a learning in that it's about decision making. You now have to make a decision that you've got to change course or whatever,
Yeah, makes sense, Michael. I have to say the approach of you writing an obituary to measure impact, I think, is something we can take away from the session. And again, that came up this morning, where it's a great way to reflect, I suppose, on the impact that you are having, and I suppose to appreciate the work that you are doing, or to acknowledge the work that you're doing. Sometimes we're so busy looking forward, we don't look at the here and the now. So I like that analogy. One definitely to take away from the session. Another one around conflict of interest, Michael. How do you deal with conflict of interest at a meeting, and possibly maybe where you're aware of a conflict but it hasn't been identified?
There's a code of there should be, every board should have a code of conduct, and that would be set out in the code of conduct. And if somebody has a blatant conflict of interest, and I'll put it like that, and there are people sitting around the table knowing that Michael Quirk has definitely got a conflict of interest here, and he or she is not declaring it, well, they address the chair. It's nothing personal to Michael Quirk, and say, Mr. Chairman, has Michael Quirk got a conflict of interest here? And you then might be able to ask a question as to why Michael Quirk may have a conflict of interest. Once it's done professionally, there is no difficulty with it, because you have a duty of care to the organisation, and that duty of care is both individually and collectively. Once you sign that B10 form, you have no escape from the duty of care that you owe to that legal entity and that you owe to the organisation. Yeah. So if there is something happening at your board, then it's through the chair is how to address it. If if you have a doubt, you know, if you have a small doubt that actually Michael Quirk does have a conflict of interest on this issue, well, maybe after the meeting, if there was no decision taken, maybe after the meeting, it's a good, or sometime between that and the next meeting, where the decision may be about to be taken, to have a word with the chairperson and say, Mr. You know, Michael, you know, chairperson, can I talk to you for a few minutes or whatever? And then say, I think Michael Quirk has a conflict of interest here and he's not declaring it. You know, you're acting professionally. Nothing personal against Michael Quirk, because remember, when you go into a room as a board director, you are there in relation to the business of the meeting. And I say this time and time to groups, it's the business of the meeting. Focus on the business of the meeting, not the fact that, you know, we're actually talking about a company that belonged to Michael Quirk's 31st cousin. That is not the issue. The issue is the business of the meeting. It has nothing to do with Michael Quirk's 31st cousin. The question is, has Michael Quirk got a conflict of interest? And if he has, well, then you're duty bound to actually raise that on a professional basis, because the consequences of not raising it. Look what happened to the FAI, and I often use the FAI as an example. Look what happened to the FAI when nobody asked how many bank accounts did the organisation have. Yet when they went before the Public Accounts Committee and they were asked a leading question, how many bank accounts does your organisation have? The key people of the day couldn't answer the question because they didn't know. So, you know, by your failure as a director, if you have a doubt, by your failure, you could be, how would I put it, coloured with the same brush if something happens in your organisation arising from the fact that you didn't act professionally when you had that doubt in the first place. You know, and sometimes I spend a lot of time talking to boards and they think about the duty of care and the business of the meeting. And I think it happens more so, if I could say, in rural Ireland, maybe than in urban Ireland, would be my experience, you know, because, you know, in rural Ireland, everybody knows possibly everybody else around the table. You know, your kids are going to school or whatever the situation is. You know, people through other activities that you're involved in, and now you have to ask a question. Well, the question should be based on the business of the meeting and the reason why you're there. You know, and if you can't ask those key questions when situations like that arise, then you've got to ask yourself, is this the best place for me? Or should I just move on, you know, at the first opportunity? Because if something happens in the organization, remember, your character and integrity is now kind of tarred with the same brush, which is a great expression of mine, you know? And that's what happens to people. It's discolored immediately. And once your integrity is interfered with, you know, you have a very huge difficulty in re-establishing that integrity again. So it's the focus on the business of the meeting, because when you go to a meeting of an organization, you're there. It's about the business of the meeting, you know, and the duty of care that you have as a director and as a leader. You're there as a leader of the organization. What's the message to the staff if there is board failure, you know? You know, so you know, I think it's one of the things that I think you know, the governance code, I think, will help solve hopefully a lot of that, but maybe not all of it, you know.
Absolutely. I think, Kevin, are you looking to come in here with a comment? I'll just unmute you.
I can't hear anything there.
Sorry, Kevin, if you just want to start again, I've unmuted you there.
Right, okay. Can you hear me now?
I can, Kevin, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Just Kevin Halford, Buncrana Credit Union. We have a similar problem, but it's an ongoing problem. We now have a register, a conflict of interest register.
Yes.
And the conflicts of interest are entered into the register. And as they're declared, when an issue arises at a meeting, then the issue has to be entered. And if the chairman or the colleagues of any individual know that or suspect that someone has a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest, then he or she is asked, challenged at that point, and it's very, very infrequent. Someone might forget occasionally, but if they do have a conflict of interest, then they have to exit the meeting while that issue is discussed.
Yeah.
And they're then readmitted. They're then readmitted afterwards. They can go to the canteen or something, but they can then be readmitted afterwards. Sorry, that's just how we handle it.
That's excellent, really, and as I said earlier on, it is becoming the norm that at the outset of the meeting, that if any director has a conflict of interest in relation to any matter on the agenda, well then that it's noted beforehand. In fact, apart from the register, some organisations have a standard A4 sheet where you have to make a declaration and sign it and date it and give it to the chairperson. Okay, so I'm sure it's the same thing as entering it on a register. So that's brilliant, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I come in there as well with a quick question, Michael?
Okay, John.
Could you just clarify there? The annual report that we're talking about here tonight isn't a compulsory part of the charity regulator's returns. What the annual return to the charity regulator? Can you just explain that a little bit to groups as to what's required as part of that?
Yeah, well, the annual return to the charity regulator would obviously form a key part as well of your annual report, because that's actually what you'll be reporting to the charity regulator, as I understand it, because I work for the a few years before I retired for the Kildare County Childcare Committee, and I made 2 submissions to the charity regulator as it then was, and the information that I gave to the regulator on each occasion, I used that as well for compiling my annual report. So if I'm, if you're giving, if you're giving different information to the regulator in relation to questions, then it's in your annual report. I'd have to ask a question about that.
That's it. No, I suppose groups were the question that came through, I think, was around, if you're doing this work, it's as long as it's not a duplication of work, and I think that's very true. You'll have a lot of this information gathered by the time you're talking to by the time you're submitting to the charity regulator. So you're as well to go that step further and tell the world about the good work as well, actually have it in that annual report format.
Absolutely, and I'm a great believer, John, and you're absolutely right. Information should only be produced once. Mm-hmm. And then it's a question of a copy and paste for the regulator, hopefully, or copy and paste for your annual report, or particularly for that part of your annual report, because, or even making the return to public as well, or any other funder, you produce the information once, and it should be the same information. It should be consistent across all your reporting bases, Okay.
Yeah, and to say as well, I've put in the charity regulator has a conflict of interest and a guide, and I've just thrown that up on the chat as well, just to complement the stuff you were saying there, Michael. Thank you.
Oh yeah, there are many. Absolutely many key guidance documents by the charity regulator. They're all excellent, and every board director should be alerted to them, and copies should be supplied if and when requested.
And one conflict of interest seems to be our theme for this evening. There's an additional question in as well. So if one of your trustees or board members provides a specialist service, they're a solicitor or an accountant, can they be contracted to do the work for the group that you're in? And even if they're on the result, if they were headhunted to the board because they were an accountant, and then I suppose they're looking maybe to get the accountancy work, would that be a no-no in terms of conflict?
No, my understanding of that, John, is that in certain cases, mm-hmm. Provided it is limited, it is documented, and everybody is in favour of it, and we'll say the stipend paid for it isn't an enormous sum of money. I think nobody will have any difficulty with that. It's in declaring it, but you possibly everybody saw the recent case in the paper there, again involving the FAI, where a key member of the board, as I understand it, gave legal advice to at least one, if not two, fellow directors. And of course, that is totally and absolutely inappropriate, and did so without informing the fellow directors. That, of course, is totally and absolutely inappropriate, and in my view, should demand instant, absolutely resignation from the board.
Yeah.
But there is provision. I just can't get it off the top of my head now. In maybe in a once-off specialist circumstance where a member of the board has a particular skill, and that skill can be got much easier and much cheaper maybe than the open market, and all board members are agreeing that to it. Clearly, for the time being, that person would have to temporarily step aside from the board and perform that that function or skill or whatever, and complete it, and then again, once it isn't, my understanding of it is that once it isn't, or once it doesn't carry an enormous amount of money, I think there's no difficulty with it.
Yeah, no.
But again, you can have your own. You can get your own legal advice on that, But I think the charity regulator actually has something on it, if memory serves me right,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I very much agree that if you on these things, if you feel embarrassed explaining it to the public, there's definitely something not right there. It is. It's gonna if there's a dodginess in your explanation, yeah, it is. It's about being upfront and being honest, and maybe they are the best person for the job, but it's being upfront about it and having it processed in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I suppose some of the learning from the CRC, the Central Immediate Clinic issue, a number of years ago, it might be relevant there as well. I think if it's a small specialist piece of work or piece of skill or whatever, I think there's no difficulty with that, and declaring it, of course, is critical. Will I continue? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Income received. List the type of income. Is it a revenue grant or is it a capital grant? And the source, is it a state agency, the HSE, local authority, government department, the ETB, etc. The expenditure by type, including details of the petty cash. All the expenditures should be listed, including details of your petty cash account. State the net position of the organisation at the end of the year. In other words, where are we at the end of the year? And then what is the overall accumulated position? In other words, what is the balance coming forward from the previous years? Are there cash reserves or cash in hand? If in a deficit, provide a note as to how this funding, this is being financed. For example, is it being financed by a loan? Are you going to cut back on something, etc.? Provide details of plans to eliminate or reduce the deficit over the next few years. Perhaps you have a plan as to how to reduce that deficit over the next 3 to 4 years, and state exactly what that plan is and the effects of it on the organisation, of course, how it impacts on the organisation. Then the sources of funding. Again, every organisation, will have different headings, but it should be the current financial year versus the previous financial year. Again, the grants, the donations, the sponsorship, the fundraising, trading or commercial activities, if they apply, or other sources of income, for example, membership fees, etc., to giving a total income for the current year and the previous year. Just to compare the 2 years, it's a good idea. Then the expenditure for the current year and again the previous year under various headings like salaries and wages, offices and premises, the insurance, light and heat, board expenses, professional fees, what you pay to your accountant, what you pay to your solicitors that you retain, and any other activity costs. Again, each organisation will be different. And your accountant will give you help with the headings, and again your funder will demand expenditure under certain headings. So make sure that your your financial summary uses the same headings to make it easy to read. Again, that would be the net surplus then, the surplus or the net position, the surplus or deficit of the funds at the end of the current financial year. That's just the end of the current financial year. And then all you have to do then is what is the accumulated position? The surplus or deficit funds at the end of the current financial year. And again, the previous financial year to give a comparison. And then the accumulated deficit from deficit or surplus from previous years. That gives you then the net overall position of your organization at the end of the particular year, say at the 31st of the 12th, 2019. What overall factors gave rise to the surplus? Again, are the accumulated surplus or the deficit, the accumulated deficit? Is this being explained in detail in the narrative? And please reference with regard to a paragraph and the page number. If you have provided a narrative in relation to all this, well then please also reference the page number in the annual report where that narrative may be found. It may be found, for example, in the Treasurer's presentation that we spoke about early on. Maybe that's where he or she referenced it, and make sure that there is a page number so that people can, again, it's about openness and transparency, so they can reference it quickly if they want to recheck it. Again, your annual report, of course, has to be signed by the chairperson and by a member of the board, usually the treasurer. They are signed by two persons, the board of management of the committee, usually the chairperson and the treasurer. Where financial statements are prepared by an accounting firm or other person, this should be stated. If you have employed a particular firm of accountants, which I'm sure you have, where you have a reasonable budget, well then the individual in that accountancy firm who is responsible should also be named, because they will possibly be coming to your AGM anyway to help with any detailed questions that may be asked. Future plans. Provide details of the organisation's plans for the coming year and the future years to meet its objectives and support its beneficiaries. What do you want to achieve? In other words, this is the journey to date. At the end of the 31st of the 12th, 2019, that's the journey to date. Now, where are you going? And how are you going to get there? And what are the actions that you're going to take to ensure that you achieve the continuation of the objectives that you have set out? What new initiatives will you undertake, or will you do something differently? In other words, what did you learn from the survey that you carried out in your community or on your beneficiaries? And are you going to take some of those new suggested initiatives on board? Will you provide more services or new services? Again, there may have been a demand for adjustment to your services, adjustment to your existing services, or indeed new services that you hadn't maybe thought about, and that may have come in the feedback from your survey, and now you're enriching your process as you're going forward with the ideas coming forward from your beneficiaries. What new targets or goals are you setting for the coming and future years? In other words, where are you going? How are you going to get there? And I suppose, how will you know that you are getting there? What are the outcomes and outputs of those key goals? Will there be any changes to who you serve or support? There may very well be, arising from the surveys or the communications that you had with your beneficiaries and your local community. Will you try to increase your volunteers and members or staff? Maybe there's a need for extra volunteers. What jobs is they going to be doing, etc. Perhaps the Donegal Volunteer Centre will have a key role to play in the recruiting of the appropriate personnel. And again, members or staff. Will there be changes to how you are governed and managed? Is there a need to look at that governing instrument? And is there a need to look at your management structure? Do you need to create maybe an extra post or something like that to help the organisation to develop and expand, having regard to the demand and having regard to the increase in funding? Will you look at how you are funded? In other words, I think lots of organisations now are looking at how they are funded, and will funding be available at the same level going forward? Will you improve your communication with your beneficiaries and your stakeholders? You know, how often do you issue perhaps a newsletter, or how often do you issue emails to your you know, to beneficiaries or to stakeholders? And what is the quality of that communication? Hello? Yeah? Okay. Will you improve overall efficiency and effectiveness? And what are the steps or actions to be implemented? And what other additional changes do you aim to achieve? You know, what changes, what other changes do you need to achieve? Do you aim to achieve? Maybe the consequences of some adjustments that you have made that you didn't actually anticipate, perhaps at the outset of the journey into the new year. That's just a glossary of keywords that sometimes form part of the nomenclature around the whole area of governance and the annual activity reports. The objectives, the beneficiaries, the outcomes, and the outputs. I leave you to all that. Now, the annual, the Good Governance Awards. These are the awards for the best annual reports and the best governance improvement initiatives. They open for entries on the 2nd of June 2020, and the closing date is the 11th of September 2020. And all the information is found on the Good Governance Awards.ie website. This year there is a new category introduced, and that is the category under 50K. It's the 6th category. Heretofore there were just 5. And for 2020, the Community Foundation Ireland will award grants of 1,000 to shortlisted organisations in Category 1. So if you become a shortlisted organisation in Category 1, just from getting shortlisted, you will receive 1,000. And a further 1,000 will be given to the overall category winner. So if you were shortlisted and you happen to also be the winner, you will get an extra 1,000. So it's worth the effort to produce as good a quality of report as you can and submit it, because you will get feedback, and that feedback will hopefully enhance your report again for the next year. So there's huge advantages to participating in the Good Governance Awards, which were initiated by the Carmichael Centre 4 or 5 years ago. Any questions on that? Okay. The next steps then, of course, is you know, there is there are reservoirs of information available on the Carmichael Ireland.ie website, and of course the charity regulator has fantastic guidelines and guidance documents on a whole range of topics. Again, the Good Governance Awards website will give you an insight into you know, what should be contained in an annual report, and how you can improve your from reading some of the notes in it, how you can improve the annual report. And remember, it's all about improving, and it's all about improving, but it's also about telling your funders that you are, you know, that your annual, from reading the annual report, that they are getting a greater value for money. Because at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the measurement that's implied is really about, are we getting value for money here? Again, the Carmichael is the leading specialist training and support body for non-profits in Ireland, and I'm proud to be a member of that team. Our training and support and resources enable our members and partners to be more effective and impactful in their individual areas. And again, if at any time following this presentation you have any further questions to ask or over the next day or so, please submit them. You can submit them to John through the Donegal Volunteer Centre, or you can send them directly to myself, Michael at carmichaireland.ie, and I will do my utmost to find the appropriate answers for you. And that's basically it from me. If there are any further questions, I'll do my utmost to provide some answers.
Well, there's nothing through the chat, Michael, but maybe we'll, Kevin, do you want to come in there?
I just wanted to ask, can a credit union apply for that Good Governance Award? Clonard Credit Union is a medium-sized community credit union.
Okay, I think you're a company limited by guarantee, yeah?
Well, it's actually under credit union legislation, but it's similar. It's similar to a company limited by guarantee, but it's actually, we are registered as a credit union.
Okay, I don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid, but what you could do is you could inquire from the Good Governance Awards people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think if you, I know Derek, our training manager, is on annual leave at the moment, but I will research that tomorrow for you. And if I can find the answer, I will certainly come back to you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I'm sure John would be. We're always on the lookout for.
He may have the answer.
For new volunteers and new directors, and John is helping us, so I'm sure he would be able to disseminate that through the credit union community. But thank you.
Yeah, no, we'd be delighted.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, I'm actually not sure the question either, and I'm one of the people who reviews the annual reports for the Good Governance. I can tell you, I haven't reviewed a credit union, but that doesn't mean to say that these aren't eligible. So yeah, no, it's something, Michael, if you can check, sure. We can distribute the answer out.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
If anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself now. We can just maybe have a round of questions if there's anything else coming to mind. There's nothing else through the chat, Michael, so if there's nothing coming from the room.
Okay, if anything comes later on, tonight or tomorrow, by all means, email me the questions, and a lot of the time I provide a written response even to all the questions that come up. But if there are more questions coming in tomorrow, that's fine with me, and I will send a written report in a day or two.
That's excellent. It's good to have that service as well, Michael, to follow up with.
Well, I think the aftercare, I think, is essential. When a presentation is given, and we've all been sitting back listening to people, giving presentations and that, and then, you're I suppose you're focused in on what's coming next, and it's only on reflection then do you realize, oh, I should have asked that question, or somebody asked a question and it threw a few thoughts up. So, aftercare, I think, what I call the aftercare of a presentation, I think is as important as the presentation itself. It
does indeed. Things pop into your mind, actually, when you leave the room. It often happens. I don't think there's anything else. Nobody else seems to be putting questions in. So we'll assume that everybody's clear. So maybe we'll leave it for tonight, Michael, but just to let everybody know, we will issue an email tomorrow with a recording of the session, and included on that email is a link to a survey which the DLDC and the Donegal Volunteer Centre have pulled together, and it's really, I suppose, around helping us to identify what training needs there are and how we can best support the community and voluntary sector, and particularly through reopening after COVID, but also with ongoing issues around governance. And I suppose as you're developing annual reports, just to be aware that between Donegal Local Development Company and the Donegal Volunteer Centre, we are very much here to support you in doing so. And if we can assist at any part of it, do feel free to give us a call. As well, with the email that goes out tomorrow, there will be an evaluation form from Michael. I remember this time, Michael. And we would ask that you would complete that evaluation, if you don't mind, and return it to either John Corner or myself, and we'll forward them on to Michael. It's always good to get feedback. As you say, you learn by listening and hearing what people's thoughts are and things maybe that didn't work out quite so well. And as well, for the survey for us, it just keeps us on the right track to make sure that we are providing the correct training and that it's relevant and relatable to your organisation. Michael or Kevin, sorry, did you want to come in there?
No, just thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, everybody. I suppose it's late in the evening, so we will close it for tonight. And thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us this evening.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, yeah.
Bye.
Take good care. Take good care.
Yeah, we're nearly all gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's,